Hello and welcome to part 17, the final part of our hard surface modeling tutorial for Maya, where we're modeling this ship. I have gone away since the last episode and added a few more textures, a few more materials to more parts of our ship here, just using the exact same techniques that we used in the last episode, so don't worry, you didn't miss anything. I did add a glass shader to these windows here. If we just wait for the render to update, I'm going to show you how to manipulate those a little bit to make them look a bit more realistic, because currently, if I zoom in here, they look very, very perfect. And obviously glass, especially if it's exposed to the elements, has a lot of like stains on it. Like, unless you're cleaning them constantly, like this ship's going to be at sea, there's not a chance in hell these are perfectly clean like that. They've probably got all sorts of groth on them. So we'll look into how you can do that while keeping the transparency. I'm also going to show you how we can go ahead and model one of our cannons here, because I know a lot of people struggle with these kind of shapes, and we haven't really gone into that much. Like, we've had to model some pretty complex bits for the hull and things like that, but nothing like this. So I'm going to show you how you can go ahead and do that. I will also show you how we can create these ropes to go along with it too, because that can be really, really handy if you want to go into that level of detail. And yeah, that will be about it. So first off, let's go ahead and look at the windows, because that will not take too long. So I'll just come back to our viewport, and if you remember correctly, we made these just like simple double-sided bit of geo. Right now they don't have any UVs, which we'll want to do. Ordinarily, I would say don't automatically unwrap anything, but in this case, where we have a bunch of different panes, we're just going to go ahead and auto wrap them, because otherwise it will take us a million years to do that by hand. We'll just run then an orient, and I'm also just going to rotate any of the ones that are on their side instead, running horizontally, because we want them to run in the direction of our windows. This is important because we're going to be using a couple image textures combined to create some like nice streaky grime on the windows. So we just want to make sure these are all the right way up, which, unless I've missed any, there's another one, looks like they are. And these extra bits, I'm not too worried about those because we don't see them. Then I am going to go ahead and set the scale and then lay those out. Okay. What we'll then do as well is delete these and then just duplicate these across. We'll do the old minus scale in X, then freeze the transforms. The important thing to do then now is these are actually flipped. As you can see, if I turn this on, they're red, which we don't want. So we'll go ahead and then flip those under tools in the UV toolkit. All stuff that we've used before. And then we'll just do the same for these ones. These are actually individual entire panes. You could do it either way. The reason I have two separate ones is just because at the time I showed you two different versions, but the texturing kind of be similar really, because these are all combined into one piece anyway. So we'll just automatically unwrap these ones too, and again just make sure everything's orientated correctly, which it looks like by default it is. And then we'll set the scale again and then align and unwrap and layout. Go ahead and get that a save. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and applied a new shader just called glass. Okay, if you don't remember how to do that, you hold down right click, go to, you select your geometry, hold down right click, go to assign new material, then under Arnold we've got AI standard surface. I'm then going to open up our hypershade. Okay, and just to bring that up with our object selected, I'm just going to press this button here, select this, and then press this again. You can also just come up to your list of materials up here and then find your shader. I have called mine glass, and it should be in here somewhere. There you go, glass. You can just select it from there and also press this button, and then that will just graph it for you, input and output connections. It will show you everything that's connected. Okay, so first things first, what we're going to do is we are going to create an AI composite node, and what you might imagine is this is going to composite two different files together, in our case, two different image textures. So I'm going to create two different file texture nodes. Okay, and these are going to be the two image textures that add the grime for us. So on the first one, I'm going to click image name. Then I'm going to go to where I keep all of my materials. I have a bit of a big library going here. I would recommend doing the same as well, using the sites that I mentioned earlier. They have a lot of different textures, and you can really just use any kind of like roughness map for this. I have a few different ones that I've picked up over time. I have some that I like here, like I have one that's specifically for dirt window stains, and you're kind of looking for a texture like this, which is black and white. Something like this will work too. Either or, and then we're just going to change the utility to raw, ignore CS color space file rules, and then take alpha as luminance, and then we're going to do the same for this one. And for this one instead, I think let's take I have a few scratches which I think are quite nice, but I don't really want to add any scratches. I think what I'll add is some smudges. Okay. And then we'll do the same here, utility to raw, ignore CS file rules, and then alpha is luminance. Okay. And we could just go ahead and plug these in, like so. Then take the out color red and put that in specular roughness, and that would do the job. But because we want to have more control over this, like we covered last time, we're going to create a few AI color correct nodes, and we're actually going to just control D these twice. Control D the first one twice, so that we have enough to connect everything up to. We're going to plug the color from our file into the input of the AI color correct. Then we're going to take the out color from the color correct and put that in the A and then in the B. It doesn't really matter which order your files go in, just put, as long as they're plugged into A and B, shouldn't really matter. We're then going to take out color from the AI composite, put that into the input of another color correct, and then we're going to take the R from the color correct into the specular roughness. Now, the reason why we have all these color corrects is because these two here allow us to customize how visible or contrasty these two image textures are, one by one. They're both then getting composited together, and then we have one final AI color correct that we can then tweak the final image once we're happy with these two. Now, on their own, they actually don't do anything at all. They're kind of just dead nodes until you adjust any of these sliders here. So we may actually have to adjust the repeat UV. I'm going to adjust that to something like 8. Just because these image textures are quite small, and this will also vary on the size of your texture, the resolution, or the UVs are quite small. So if I do that, and then we come to a bit of an angle, and I go ahead and render this. Okay, and as you can see, that's already added quite a lot of grit. I'm kind of happy with how that's looking already, to be honest. But we're keeping the transparency, because you can see the rest of the windows through there. These do look very dirty, though, by comparison to the rest of the ship, and we could make the rest of our ship more dirty using techniques that I showed you earlier, right? Using the mix shader. But I think what I'm going to do for the sake of this video is I will just make the windows a little less dirty, but while still keeping this grime. It's important that you... Let me just close this. Plug this only into the specular roughness. Because if you put this into the color or anything like that, it's not going to do anything. You can see with the transmission all the way up, we actually don't have any color because, you know, it's a window, it's transparent. There's a few different things here that we can do to adjust this. I think we're actually not going to need to adjust these. At least I'm not going to. You certainly can if you want to. But for the sake of this, I'll just show you us adjusting this last one. So this will adjust both at the same time. And you're going to need to make sure that you're in rendered view for this. You don't have to. You could potentially just adjust it and then come out of it and then go back. But I like to stay in rendered view while we're doing this. Just because I think it gives us more control and we can kind of just do it on the fly. So the thing that we're looking for to reduce the overall like kind of griminess of this is there's a few different things we can change. We could change the multiply. So if I put this down to like half, you can see already the windows are far more transparent and we can see through a lot more, and it's got rid of a lot of that grime. We could also reduce the contrast, and this will just reduce like the overall what's it called? Like the contrast of the image, right? So if it's black and white, it will make it a bit more towards grey. That will remove some of the dirt, but it also makes the windows generally more rough overall because we're kind of just then plugging in a directly grey image. So in this case, what we want to do is actually reduce the multiply. I'm just going to drop that down to bang on nearly half, bit below half, and you can see we've still got a bit of grime, okay? But the windows are a bit more transparent, and this looks a little bit more realistic to me, not too overly dirty. If we come and look here from this angle as well, give that a bit to render, you can see there's still a bit of grime in there. You can see it as well on this window here. And it just adds a bit of imperfection to the windows that I think is nice, especially if you're going to be like animating this or having it on a turntable. When you have that specular rollover, being just as you rotate around, you get like the bright highlight going over the window. It just gives a bit of surface breakup and makes it more interesting, kind of like how we did for the masts and like the underside of the hull here. So that's how we create a glass shader. Let's now come out of rendered view and then move on to how we create one of these cannons. So I am gonna go ahead and duplicate this boy here, bring him out. Okay, and then just hide the rest of the ship, because right now we don't need him. I'm also just going to turn the light layer off. And what I'll do then as well is just reduce all the rotations on these, because there's a few set from what I had done. And then for the time being, let's just bring this back to the grid. Okay, bring it up a bit. Okay. Mine are also rotated slightly because of how I made the model, so I'm just going to go ahead and bring that back to about normal. Okay, so this is one that I made for my HMS Victory model that I showed you right at the beginning of the course. And it actually doesn't take too long to make, and it might look kind of scary with these sort of intersections here. But it's not too bad. But the reason why, and the reason why it's important to know to do this, is because when you're making things, you kind of want to make them, we might have mentioned this already, in parts that make sense realistically. So as far as I know, cannons like this were sort of cast in one piece. As in, they would pour liquid metal basically into a mold, and then it cools and create one like uniform single piece of metal. So when you're building things, you kind of want to make them as they were built in real life, within reason. Obviously, like, you need to fake it at a minute scale, that's okay. But for the bigger stuff like this, you kind of want it to be accurate, I think, anyway. And it will depend on like the needs of your shot or your model or whatever you're using it for. If it's just for funsies, do whatever you like. But this is how I like to do things. And it's how a lot of the industry does things. So let's stop waffling on, let's actually get on and make this. So to begin with, I'm just going to create a cylinder. Very exciting, I know. And then we'll rotate it 90 degrees in X. For the divisions, by default it's 20. I'm just going to up this to 24, just to keep it as like a more divisible number. I like things to kind of be like divisible by 4, but 24 is just kind of a number I generally go to. I know 20 is also divisible by 4. We're only adding an extra 4. But 24 is just like a nicer amount for me, I think, to start off with. So let's get this roughly into position. I'm going to go ahead and just pull mine to the side now, because we're just using this as a guide. I'm using it as a guide for myself, really. I'm basically just going to recreate it and then show you how I did it. So we'll bring our cylinder out. I'm going to go into the top view, go to vertex mode, and just pull these out like so. Okay. And then I'm just going to scale these in slightly, because the cannons aren't perfectly straight. They kind of come back in a bit like this. Okay. And then we have this flared end like this. And you can also make this to reference if you like. That's what I did originally with these cannons. I'm just showing you how I would go about making one of these. We're going to select the end, pull that out, okay, to roughly the right place, and I'm just going to then scale that up uniformly. I'm going to take the multi-cut tool, add an extra division in the middle, and then just pull that in, just to add a bit of flair. Okay, and we're going to keep it simple for now, like we do with everything else. We're then going to go ahead and select this back piece here, and then just extrude straight back. Okay, then we're going to extrude again, come back like this, and now this part here is kind of important, because this is kind of, I think ropes connect up to this part. Also, I don't understand entirely the mechanics of how cannons work. I know they have a hole up here, which I haven't included because it's too small of a detail, and I didn't ever plan to get that close. Where like you light the fuse and the actual chamber of the cannon ends somewhere down here. But they have this kind of like butt stop type buck thing at the end. So we'll go ahead and create that too. So it's just a cylinder and extruding right now, so we don't really have to do too much crazy modeling. And then we'll just go ahead and pull that back. And then we will add in a few more edge loops. I'm going to go ahead and bevel this one because I want a few more, and I'm going to adjust the segments. Okay. Then we will pull this in, bevel it again, and add a few more segments. Okay, just to give us that shape. Then we also want this rounded off at the end, so we'll go ahead and bevel that one more time. Maya is being a bit funky for some reason. That does happen occasionally. Let's see what we can do. Okay, if something like that happens, it's just Maya being a pain in the butt. It does happen occasionally. In that case, we can just create this kind of shape ourselves. I'm just going to extrude that in. Multi-cut tool, select this edge. Then we'll just do edit edge flow right about there. Okay, maybe scale that out a bit. Put it forward. Okay, and there we just created our own bevel. Normally you shouldn't have to do that, but if that does happen, then you can just very quickly do it yourself on things like this. Okay. What we're also going to do is extrude this out a little. Something like that. And then we'll delete these edge loops. Okay. Then we can also go ahead and add in... okay, let's undo that. We can go ahead and add in some extra shape here. So let's go ahead and extrude these a little. Okay. I'm going to delete this edge just to give us a bit of a step up like this. Okay, then I'll go ahead and extrude this one again. Like so. And then to get us our smooth shape back, we're then just going to go ahead and edit edge loop utilities, to edge loop and delete these. Okay, but we want this to be a little rounded, so we're going to take one edge with the multi-cut tool, push that in, scale that out a bit, and then just bevel to add some extra divisions. And there you go. We've got a bit of faceting here, so I'm just going to go ahead and mesh display soften edge. You don't have to do this again, but it's just something I like to do because I don't like to see it on my models while I'm working. I like to see what is going to be smooth. Okay. Then while we're here, we'll just go ahead and add in a bevel for this guy. With a few more segments as well. Okay, cool. So we're starting to get there. Next thing we can do is add a few more segments here. We'll increase that to 2. Space that out a little bit more evenly. We need to add a couple bands here, so let's get the multi-cut tool. And then what I like to do here is, let's assume we want these to all be the same thickness. So I'll put them here, and I'll put another one in the middle. Okay, I'll place our edge loops, and then I'm going to select all of them, and then just bevel them. Okay, and then these will slide with the bevel along our mesh. Okay, then I can just scale them all down uniformly to be the width that I want. Okay. This one here, we want to have a little bit more detail, so we're going to use the exact same technique. We'll add an edge loop in the middle using the middle mouse button. Okay, and then we will pull this out a bit, and then I will go ahead and do another one. And what we're doing here is we're just kind of creating the lines for this particular little detail before we go ahead and extrude. So I want this one to be a little smaller. So we'll start from the outside and then work our way in. So I'm just holding on shift and double clicking these to get these selected. We'll then pull those out a bit. We'll then work in by 1, then pull up again. Just a little bit, we don't want this to be too tall. And then pull out again. Okay, there we go, and there we have our detail. We'll go ahead and add a few bevels while we're at it. We don't need to be super tight because this is just cast iron. It's not going to have these incredibly sharp edges. So we'll just add a few. Like this. Now we go ahead and smooth that. It has that nice detail there. And we're already getting a bit of a cannon shape here. Next thing we'll do is we'll actually make the hole at the end so the cannonball can come out. Extrude that down. Now, and then the design for these kind of varies from cannon to cannon, country to country, and also like the poundage. So it's kind of up to you really how you make yours. I'm just showing you how I would do this. Oh, we've got a few extra edges there we don't need. Okay, so we'll extrude that out a bit. Then we will come in again. And extrude out again. And then one more time. Probably down to something like that. The actual opening isn't that big. A lot of it's just solid material because cannons had to withstand a lot of pressure. As far as I know. And then one more time. Okay, and then we'll just pull this all the way back. And then we don't need to make sure that we're adding the actual like mechanism or the firing pin or anything back there. We just kind of want the hole to be long enough so that when we actually go ahead and render this, it's just going to look dark on the inside, right? You won't be able to see the end and it will look realistic. Okay, now that we've got that, we'll just go ahead and add a bevel to all of these edges. Pretty soft one. Let's actually add some edge loops. Then we'll just soften the edges. Okay, and we don't want these to be too close together because we don't want this to be too sharp. Okay, like that, and there we go, there's the opening to our cannon. And then all we need to do is add these extra 2 bands. Okay, we'll add some loops to these. Still trying to keep pretty even spacing, but don't worry if it's not 100% perfect. Okay, there we go, and then we have our base cannon shape. So the next thing we need to do is add this part here, which is kind of where it will pivot off of from like the chassis or the wooden part of the gun. So best way to do that is we're just going to create another cylinder and we're going to connect this up to the gun itself. So I'm going to rotate this on its side, so 90 degrees in Z or Z. We're then going to give this 8 divisions. And we want this to sit down kind of towards the base here. Not too wide, maybe something like this. Okay, and then what we're looking to do is make sure that we have enough divisions on this piece to match up with... Okay, so that these lines line up here. So you can see we have the middle one lining up here, this one here, this one here, and then we'll take care of these ones. Okay, for ease of use on this, what I'm going to do is just cut this in half, right? Like we did ages and ages ago in some of the earlier parts. We do not want to have to do this twice, so we just cut the model in half and then duplicate it over later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these vertices around until they're kind of matching the outer edge or the outer surface of this model, like this. Okay. Then we will join these up. So we'll pull that down, and then this. Okay, now we're going to need a few extra edge loops here, so I want these to line up kind of along the center line, like so. Don't worry if it's not perfect, because we're going to be merging the vertices anyway. We want to do another one there, and then we will also have another one here, and another one here. Okay, what we're going to do first is just start to trace out our shape using the grid that we've just created. Okay, make sure that connects up nicely. Then what I'm going to do is just make sure these vertices are aligned. I'm holding down the V key to snap. Again, this is why we kind of aligned up those vertices in the first place, so that these aren't coming too far off the surface. Okay. There, now we have our circle. So we're going to go ahead and delete these faces. Okay. And then now this is all quads. And smooths pretty evenly. Okay. What we're now going to do is I'll just pull this back a bit. Okay. Select both, and then we're going to combine. To actually combine objects, you can hold down Shift and right click and then come to combine. I just have it as a button up here. Okay, we're going to double select these two edges and then just bridge. Okay. Next thing to do will be select all of these edges at the join. We're going to add a bevel. Turn chamfer off so we just have a bit of a holding edge. Okay, we're going to have a protective one here. We'll add a bevel here as well. Like so. We don't use these edges here because they can just be quads. And if we go ahead and smooth, you can now see we very, very quickly added our cylinder to the gun. And it's got a nice smooth join. We've got a nice smooth transition, and it's all one piece. What we can do next is we can go ahead and add in our like donut piece like this up here. So very much the same kind of process. Just going to soften those edges. We're going to create, instead of a cylinder, we're going to create a torus, this donut shape here. We'll just snap that over there. And then under torus, we're going to want to change some of these parameters again. So I'm going to change the subdivision height to 8, right, to match our cylinder. And I'm going to scale that down. Okay, till it kind of fits within the bounds of this part. Something like that. Maybe a bit bigger. Okay. Then I think what I'll do is I'll reduce the section radius down to something like 0.4, and then we'll go ahead and just delete these because we don't need them. And then we're going to extrude this down a bit. Like so. Okay, now to join these up, basically the exact same thing. Let's go ahead and delete this side because we don't need it. Then what we're going to do is just raise this up slightly, okay? And then we want to make sure that we have the same geo here as we do here so that we can get this to match up. So this one's going to be a little bit more fiddly. But as you can see, we can just very, very quickly draw that on. Okay, we might need to move a few things around, but that's okay. So what I'll do is just snap this. Okay, looks like that wasn't quite centered, so that's okay, we'll pull that over. Okay, and we can go ahead and clean this up in a moment, but we just want to get this to line up. Something like that. Okay, great. And then we'll delete those faces. What I'll then do then is I'll have this come around so that doesn't have a weird connection there, and I'll connect this up so we still keep this as quads, but the connection's actually a bit cleaner. Like so. Okay. Will we take most of this edge and then bring it back so it lines up a bit better? Something like this. Okay, now again, we're going to combine these two pieces, and then we're going to select just these edges. Bridge. Just these ones, and then bridge. Okay, we'll probably go ahead and actually delete these for the time being. Then we'll just select these here, and then add another bevel. We'll turn the chamfer off again, and then just extend that out a little. Seems like we've got a bit of a problem here. I see what the issue is. Okay. We want that to be detached there. So now if we go ahead and add in our bevel, that should work just fine. Okay, and there you go. Now you have another attached piece, and it took just a few seconds. So what we can then go ahead and do is, what I like to do when doing stuff like this is I'll just select all the vertices on this one side, and then just scale them and hold down X to snap to grid just to make sure that's perfectly aligned, so that when we go ahead and duplicate this, we don't have any weird issues with things not lining up. Okay, combine. Then that's now combined, but we have these vertices in the middle uncombined, so we need to go to Edit Mesh and then Merge. Okay, just a quick soften edges, and now we have our completed gun. You can make this a bit thicker if you want to. This is just a quick sort of test one to show you how it's done. But you can see it's really not that scary at all. It's not particularly high poly because we're connecting circles or cylinders to cylinders basically, so it's a lot easier. If we had to cut in some square pieces here, then the geometry would have to be quite a lot denser to be able to support the sharp corners, but because it's cylinders, you really can get away with, I mean, this cylinder here for the gun is 24 divisions around, and then this is 8, and then this is also 8 over here as well. But yeah, that is the single piece. What I'll then go ahead and show you next is how we create those ropes. So if I go ahead and untie our ship, okay, these ropes in particular, I'll just duplicate that, pull that out and hide the ship again. Actually, you know what, let's pull the whole gun out instead. Let's get maybe this one. Okay, and we'll bring that down to the grid. Okay, so you can see here there's various different bits and pieces for the chassis, and this will depend on the gun. This is just a particular one that the Royal Navy was using at the time, I guess, for the HMS Victory. None of these parts are particularly complicated. You can definitely create all of those yourself. You can even see here there's some of the rigging parts that we'd made in previous videos. But one part that might be quite tricky for you guys to create is this rope here. You can see looks reasonably realistic. It's pretty loosely coiled, but from a distance I think it does the job. I kind of did this on mine for any thicker parts that you can see, and the way we create that is actually really quite simple. So what you're going to want to do is create a cylinder, reduce the divisions down to 8, okay, because we don't want this to be too dense polygonally wise. And we can adjust the size of this first piece depending on how thick our rope is, because what we're going to do is we're just going to delete these, okay. We'll then make sure that's sitting on the bottom of the grid just by aligning the pivot point to the bottom and then holding X to snap to grid. Okay, then what we're going to do is the length of this will depend on how long we need our rope to be. Now this piece seems way too thick still, so I'm just going to scale that down again. Maybe something more like this. Okay, let's say we need a piece of rope something like this long. Okay, what we're going to do next is if I just come to the top view, isolate that, I'm just going to turn on smooth because I want to take this out now to the right. Now if you can't see the top of your cylinder from the top in the top view, it's because we have the top faces removed. So to get that to be able to be visible, just turn on wireframe on shaded and then it will show up there for you as well. There's this little button up here, this blue square. We're then going to pull this out to the side, and we want this to just about overlap. And we want 4 of these, right? Something like this. We're then going to go ahead and just combine these, center the pivot, and then we'll move that back to the grid. And it's very important this is centered on the grid, and that will become apparent later. This is nearly perfect, but what we're missing is some divisions running up the length of the strands, because we need this to bend, and without those it won't be able to bend. So we're going to use our insert edge loop tool, and you can find that under mesh tools and then insert edge loop. I've got it bound to Shift F. If we go ahead and double click the tool now on the left hand side here and change the maintain position to multiple edge loops, by default this will be set to 2, but what this will allow us to do is then add as many edge loops as we need. So I'm going to try 64 is a bit light. Let's try something like 120. Now this is why we only had 8 divisions on this, because this can get quite dense very quickly, and I wouldn't use this for everything unless you really plan to take this to a very high detail level. I just like to set this back to 2 afterwards so I don't accidentally add 128 divisions to something I don't want to. Now, to make this look like more like rope, what we're going to do is we're going to intertwine these now using a deformer. If you come up to deform and then come to non-linear and then twist. Now, this will automatically create the handle for you that we've got selected here. Under the channel box and layer editor, under twist, you've got a few different attributes here. So you have start angle and end angle, and low bound, high bound, that will kind of just adjust where things, you can see where this starts and ends. By default, this will be at the ends of your model, which is where we need it to be. We're then going to change the start angle, not start angle, sorry, end angle, and you can see as I start to rotate this, just dragging down, dragging to the right with my middle mouse button clicked, you can see it's starting to rotate this. Okay, we could do this by hand, but it would take forever, so if I just increase this to something like 360, okay, you can see that's still not quite enough, but it is starting to rotate around itself. If we put this up to something like 900, okay, it's even more. We go 1,500, okay, getting there, 2,500, okay, nearly. Okay, and you can see by 3,500 we're already getting a pretty good shape. Maybe let's just put this up to 5,000. Maybe 6,000. There are like diminishing returns of this because eventually it's kind of down to how many divisions you have in the cylinders. It will start to kind of compress, look a bit weird. So I'm gonna leave that at 6,000. But you can see now we've taken those 4 cylinders and intertwined them into a bit more of a rope shape. Pretty thick rope, but I think it serves its purpose. Okay, now once we're happy with that, we're going to go ahead and press edit, then delete all by type in history. That will delete those handles for us. And if you're wondering how I got this curve to look like this, best way to do this is what we can do. And we did this with the rigging in one of the earlier parts, or when I showed you how to do the rigging. So we're going to select some of these parts here that we know the curve needs to rest on, okay, or the rope needs to rest on, right? So something like this, and then it goes through here. So what I'll do is Control D these parts and then combine. I'll just pull them out of the group and then call them guide, right? Because we don't want to have geometry duplicate on top of each other and causing any problems. For the time being, we'll just go ahead and hide that because we don't need it. We'll select our guide and we're going to turn on live surface, excuse me, and then we're going to come over to curves. Then select the EP curve tool. Okay, and then basically what we're going to do now is just start drawing our curves on the model. This will take us most of the way, but we're going to have to do a bit more to adjust it afterwards ourselves. So if I pull it over here, okay, maybe something like that. Okay, we'll then turn off that. Now what we're going to have to do is start adjusting these curves a little bit ourselves. Okay, there's probably not enough points here to get this to look exactly how we need it, but we'll get it to as close as we can to begin with. Okay, we want it to come out to this loop, kind of over like this. Okay, and then we want it to come over this wheel. Okay, we want a bit of clearance here because we're going to need to attach our model to this afterwards, and I'll show you how we do that in a minute. Now, because we don't have enough divisions in this curve, it's looking a bit weird, so we're going to go ahead up to curves up here, and then go to rebuild and click on this option here. You want to kind of make your settings like this. It probably won't look exactly like this by default, but the number of spans is how many points we have to control this curve. So I'm going to increase this up to something like 16 and click apply. Okay, and if I come back to control vertex, you can see that's created a bunch more. And it's also caused a few little problems, and that will happen from time to time. This can get a bit fiddly and you kind of have to unwind it, which is kind of a pain, but it is worth doing. You can also flat rotate or flat scale these to get them to align properly. You can also delete the points if you don't want them. Okay, we just need to figure out which order these are supposed to go in. Let me get rid of that guy. Okay, and then now that we have a few more, we can start pulling these in to create a bit of a better shape. Like so. Okay, and you basically, you get the idea at this point. We're kind of just moving our points around, trying to create a natural looking curve. So obviously, as the rope rests, it would rise up to here, but then it would sag over here, right? Because it's got nothing to rest on. And then as it comes back over here, we'll straighten out a bit again. Okay, maybe I'll bend a little bit this way. Okay, but you get the idea. So it's important you spend as much time as you can at this point, just getting your curve to look as kind of accurate as possible, physically. Yeah, maybe something like this. We could pull this in a bit more on this side. Like so. And then we'll pull these over so they're actually going through the hole. Okay. And then maybe pull this bit off of it. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. So we can close that. I'm going to come out of wireframe on shaded. We have our curve. Now, if we want this to attach to this, first things first, select this. I would name it at this stage as well, because otherwise, if you do this a bunch of times, it's going to be hard to name them all afterwards. You're going to want to make sure that all your history is deleted off of it, and make sure your transforms are frozen, and also, I would center the pivot on it, and then center it on the grid, like this. Okay? So not from the very bottom, just have the center of the object be on the grid. Okay, and then make sure that's frozen. We're then going to select our geo, select our curve. We're going to come up to deform again, and then we're going to go to curve warp. Okay. Now, if your settings aren't quite working, this is what you want to change it to. Aim should be set to auto normals, alignment to auto, envelope to 1, and then under keep length. This kind of is a bit more important for when your rope isn't long enough. For example, if this rope was way too short, what would happen is it would only follow so much of the curve, and if you unticked keep length, it would then go to the rest of the curve. But because we make sure that we had enough length in our rope already, we don't really need to pay attention to this feature, and you can see it's not really doing anything anyway. Okay, before deleting history, what we can also do as well is we can come back to our curve, and because this is connected, we can actually edit our rope now, the position of our rope using the curve, right? So we're kind of getting the basic idea of where it's supposed to be with the curve beforehand. But then once we're actually happy with that, we can come in and then place it. And it works really quite well. So really all we're looking to do here is just, now that we have the mesh in place, make it look a bit more physically accurate. Make sure nothing's actually colliding, or at least intersecting, sorry. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So I'll go ahead and delete the history again. And then once the history is deleted, we can delete the curve. All I'll do then is, in this case, we'll set the pivot point to the middle of the gun, since that's the central part. Duplicate this, bring it across in X. Okay, we could then go ahead and combine these if we wanted to. Just by selecting and then bridge. Don't know why that's not working. Bridge. Oh, you need to combine them first, sorry. Select the two pieces of the mesh, combine, then bridge. Okay. This one should probably go to this one to this one, because you've got to make sure that you're maintaining that twist. like so. Okay, and then you won't really notice the divisions too much in there since it's going in the center, and there you go, that's the rope. And that is how you'd make the cannon. These parts here are really simple. I have like pretty much full confidence in you guys creating that after you've done everything else. But yeah, if I go ahead and delete the guide, maybe let's take this guy out here, and we can add in our cannon that we created previously. And he might not quite, this guy might not quite fit. It's not far off actually, that's not too bad. Because I made this chassis to actually fit the gun I made before. But it's a little bit smaller. And there you go, you can see that fits in there. You know, if we need to make any adjustments to the rope afterwards, I would recommend just selecting some of the vertices at the point you need to move, holding down B to go into soft select, getting a bunch of that and then just moving it into place. Making sure you keep the shape as even as possible. And there you go. That is how I'd create the cannon. And that's going to leave it there, I think. There's the sails as well. I think at this point you guys could quite easily go ahead and do that after doing all of this. Someone did mention that they wanted to actually see us add all the detail. We did kind of mention in a previous video that we weren't going to... Well, we have a video of me adding all the detail for this. It's a couple hours long. Because the reason we didn't show it in the video is that or at least I kind of feel like we gave you all the know-how to create this yourself, and I have a lot of confidence in the fact that you probably could do that now. But if you do have any questions about how to add certain details, definitely ask if there's anything you're unsure about. But I remember we went and showed you how to create these hatches, and if you can create these hatches, then I think we also showed you how to create this. I think you'll have no issue creating the rest of this stuff. And if you're unsure about what to actually add, just revert back to your reference. There's so much reference online. Here's the images I was using, where you can see a lot of these details, and you might not be able to pick some of it out based on just the drawings, right? You might be able to pick out like these boards here and guess that, you know, you can see them here as well, and they connect up to the masts here. But the best possible reference for you, I would say, would be the HMS Victory. This is the one that I modeled myself. You can see there's a huge mess of ropes, but you can actually see everything in a lot of detail, and there's a huge amount of photography for this online because it is a tourist attraction in the UK. I think at the moment, I don't know whether they fixed it, but there was a point where they'd taken off some of the masts. Yeah, here you can see it, and a lot of the rigging. So a lot of those parts are missing, but you can find older pictures of it where it did still have everything, and you can see all the detail in there. There's also these quite nice drawings as well that have been done over time, and obviously people have made very accurate models as well. You can get a lot of that information in there as well. So if you're unsure of what to add, definitely look at the reference or send us a message as well. We'd be happy to help you. I could do another flyover of the model I've made in the past and sort of show you guys what should go where, so let us know if you'd like to see that. But yeah, I mean, I hope you've enjoyed this 17-part series. I think this was definitely quite a big project to do and a tough one to tackle just because of the sheer amount of detail. And I hope we've done it somewhat justice. And I am quite sorry we didn't get to go ahead and add all the individual little details, but I think then we'd be keeping you here for months and months, and surely you would just eventually lose interest. But I think that what we've done is we've kind of hopefully given you the tools and the knowledge to go ahead and finish this off yourself. And if you do, we'd love to see your creations. We'd love for you to send them through to us so we can have a look to see what you've made as well. And yeah, I just hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned a lot. It's definitely a difficult project, and when I first created my first one, it took forever. It took me months. Sometimes I spent entire days just gathering reference, trying to find images for things. So I definitely understand if you're having a harder time putting some of the details together, but it is out there, and I can point you guys to any particular websites or links if you are struggling. And again, yeah, thank you very much for watching and sticking with the tutorial. I know it's been a pretty long one, but hopefully you've created something quite fantastic with it. And yeah, thank you again, and we'll probably come back with some more longer form videos next week on a different topic. We haven't entirely decided on what that is yet. But yeah, again, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.